Welcome back, everyone. We're going to skip the order that's in the notes now. So on page 13 of your notes, it says 3 divergent paths in the suttas after jhana. And so we are going to look at that, but we'll look at that at the end. Once you've attained jhana, 3 different paths of development. But first I want to skip ahead to page 14, and now let's look at jhana in the Visuddhimagga. Right? So jhana in the Visuddhimagga uses the exact same definitions, but the understanding is different. And so now that we know what the suttas are teaching, it's pretty simple, and it'll be short to take a look at what the Visuddhimagga is saying. So in the Pali Suttas, there are 4 jhanas, and they're numbered, right? First, second, third, and fourth jhana. Those 4, that nomenclature is the same in the Visuddhimagga, the first through fourth jhanas, but they call those rupa jhanas. That terminology doesn't exist in the suttas. In the suttas, they're just the jhanas. Here, they're called rupa jhanas, and it means fine material or formal jhanas. And then one of the things that we'll look at and we'll go into more detail when we go back to the 3, because we're not going to get the detail now because we're switching the order in the notes, but the 3 paths that you can follow after jhana. One of them is developing these 4 additional states, which are called the formless attainments. And they're called immaterial or formless attainments in the suttas. The word is arupas. Rupa, remember there was rupa jhana, that's form. In the beginning is a negation, so arupa is without form. So they're listed here, but we won't go into the detail of what those are here, so we'll come back. But so the 4 rupa jhanas and these 4 arupas are grouped together into what's called the 8 attainments. And so just know that's a list. The suttas don't put them together as the 8 attainments. And in a few instances, the arupas of both the suttas and the Visuddhimagga, in a few instances, the Visuddhimagga calls the arupas arupa jhanas. So it puts those formless attainments, actually puts the label jhana on them. But the suttas do not do that. So it's just a different naming system. But it's interesting that they consider them to be jhanas there too. And just as a sort of FYI, you'll sometimes hear people talk about those formless attainments, those formless jhanas, as the 5th through 8th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th jhanas. I cannot find that anywhere in any text. It's not in the suttas, it's not in the Pali commentaries, it's not in the Visuddhimagga. And I've asked a couple of Pali scholars about this, and they agree that they say, so it's not just that I've missed it, they say also that naming system, 5th through 8th jhana, numbering them is not anywhere in the texts. It's not wrong, we just want to understand. So their best guess was it was of a more recent or modern innovation. Someone just made that up. And for example, I know Ayakima, a jhana teacher, she's no longer alive, but she talked about them. So she may have coined those terms herself, don't know. But anyway, just to know if you hear that so you don't get confused. Okay. So remember we talked about the 40 meditation subjects of the Visuddhimagga. And if you turn to page 15 on your notes, I have a table there in the Visuddhimagga lists which jhanas you can attain through which of those 40 subjects. So it's there. Suttas don't do this, so that's another difference. There's no, anyway, it's just not discussed like that. So for example, mindfulness of breathing And remember, we talked about what were called the 10 kasinas. Those can lead all the way to any of the first 4 jhanas. There were 10 recollections. Mindfulness of breathing and the body was one, but 8 of those 10 recollections would lead you to access concentration only. There's mindfulness of the body, and there were 10 kinds of foulness, meditations on decaying corpses. Those could take you to first jhana only, so you can see there. That's kind of interesting. I don't know if that's really how things work, but that's the system. And this is one of the most important points. Near the bottom of page 15, I say, note, in Visuddhimagga jhana, body awareness is lost as the mind absorbs into the nimitta. This may be one of the most important points of our entire series together. As we've seen, the suttas are, I think, could not be more explicit and could not be more detailed and clear that in jhana, the awareness it's in a state of enhanced body awareness. The awareness is immersed in the body, drenched, steeped, pervaded. The Visuddhimagga is you have disconnected or cut off any awareness of your body. And so in practice, for example, I mentioned in the last session that, say, for example, you were having an experience of some kind of piti that was maybe a blissful experience. The suttas have us bring the bliss, either it happens on its own or we do it consciously, pervade it so it's suffused through the body. So the bliss is coming into you. In practice with the Visuddhimagga, you do the opposite. You go into the bliss with your awareness. So if you're seeing a light and it's a blissful light, for example, the feeling is it's compelling and it's a good feeling. You're going to want to be pulled into the light. You go into a mental realm disconnected from awareness of your body. So we can say a lot more about that in practice, when we're talking on the practice side. So I'm guessing for many of you, the question is, well, how can the Visuddhimagga say that, given that the suttas and the definitions and the similes are so explicit and so clear? How they say it, we will come back to, because I don't think it's our next day long together. I think it might be the one after that. We are going to go into controversies around Samadhi and Jhana. And some of the controversies we'll look at, one will be, is Jhana, according to the text, is Jhana necessary for enlightenment? Are there 2 paths of meditation, samatha and vipassana, tranquility, insight, or just one? And what is jhana? Is it a state of, as the Visuddhimagga says, without, well, we already know that the suttas say it is embodied, and the Visuddhimagga says it's disconnected, but we're going to look at, well, how does the Visuddhimagga get away with that? How can they say that? And we'll see how they take that definition and do that. For now, just be aware that really, as you're starting to see, there are 2 different jhana systems. Because the experiences that the Visuddhimagga is pointing to are real experiences. You can really have that disembodied, disconnected from the body jhana. And so we should just know that there are 2 different jhana systems out there. And we don't have to judge any of them, make them right or wrong. We can be respectful of the whole, the big world out there of different practices and experiences. And what's important is, as we study this, then we can be more informed to see what works best for each of us. One hypothesis I have on the way this might work And this is not any text, this is just me. And keep in mind, as I am about to say this, that I'm not a brain scientist. I actually don't know much about how the brain works. But experientially, this is what it seems like to me. And I wouldn't be surprised if, as we learn more about the brain, what I'm about to say is actually what happens. Whatever part or parts of the brain, or maybe it's the whole nervous system, but we'll just say the brain, that come to quiescence when we come to a mind that's undistracted, steady, unmoving. We could say one-pointed or unification of mind, that ekaggata. When that comes to its culmination, that is the same in both of these jhana systems. And experientially, I will tell you that is true. It's just as deep. Sometimes people think Visuddhimagga jhana is a deeper jhana, deeper concentration, but that is not true. They're equal. Both jhanas come to that level of one-pointedness or steadiness or stillness. Whatever other parts of the brain give rise to that mental activity, they give rise to the visual experiences, sounds, the experience of feeling your body, all these other experiences. In Sutta Jhana, those are left alone. They're still active, even though the mind is just as deeply concentrated. We let those still function. And matter of fact, that's why we can have the insight right in the jhana, because we're still connected with a much more powerful mind with the experiences of change. Whereas in the Visuddhimagga jhana, all those other parts of the brain have also come to quiescence. And so that's cut off. We don't have those awarenesses. No sights, no sounds, no body sensations. Anyway, I think it's an accurate description of how it's experienced. And maybe one day we'll find out if that's what actually happens in the brain. So for now, let's just leave it at, there's these two different systems. We know what the Visuddhimagga is opposite from the Sutta jhana in some way. We'll get into the controversies later about, well, how do they come up with that? I think it's kind of interesting, but you'll see. A few other just quick things here. Remember I said in the suttas we've been talking about how the vitaka vichara, we don't really know what those terms, how they were understood back in the Buddha's day. And so it's defined today either as thinking and pondering, thought and examination, some kind of mental activity like that. Or it's understood as connecting and sustaining the attention on the meditation object. And of all the terms we're looking at in this whole series, that's the least understood if we want to know, what the understanding was, 2,000 or 2,500 years ago. The Visuddhimagga is explicit and clear. It means connecting and sustaining the attention on the meditation object. It's not thought and examination or anything else. Piti also, suttas don't define what they mean. It just gives us a term. The Visuddhimagga is quite explicit. And for example, there's showering piti. It feels like it's kind of showering down. We won't go through it, but there's 5 different kinds of piti that are given. And sukha, the sukha is like in the suttas, it can be pleasure or happiness. And then, turning to page 16, the ekaggata, I had translated as unification of mind for the suttas. In the Visuddhimagga, it's a fixed concentration, it's one-pointedness, so it's a very narrow kind of concentration. And then at the end of your notes there on page 16, I've listed what we already mentioned, the 8 attainments, the 4 jhanas and the 4 formless attainments together, okay? So that's the basic what's different between Visuddhimagga and Sutta jhana. Okay. Okay. Let's do one more piece in this session. Turn back now. We'll look at the 3 divergent paths of attainment or cultivation we're back in the suttas now. Well, the Visuddhimagga has this too, but 3 divergent paths after jhana. After attaining the 4 jhanas, you can attain these 4 formless attainments. And let me just name them here. They're called arupas, without form. And remember, there could be sometimes called arupa jhanas in the Visuddhimagga. And they're called the base or the sphere. Here I said base of boundlessness of space. And in that, the awareness of the body now falls away. These are formless now, even in the suttas. And so there's only an experience of limitless space. The next one is boundless consciousness, the base of boundless consciousness. There's only the experience of boundless consciousness. The next one after that is called the base of nothingness. And then there's the base of neither perception nor non-perception. That's got to be a pretty subtle state, right? The suttas don't give us, and they just name these. They're not giving us directions on how to develop them, as opposed to in the 4 jhanas. It talked about in the similes. You certain qualities drop away, and you incline your mind, and you suffuse piti or sukha through the body, for example. They're just given in the suttas. Visuddhimagga does give some directions in their system on how to develop these. Right? I have heard, I remember someone had come back from a, 10-day retreat somewhere. I don't remember the teacher. And he said, well, after, the whatever day of the retreat, we were all walking around in the formless, the sphere of boundless consciousness or whatever. But there's no walking around in these, there's no sense of the body or awareness or anything. That person may have been in a wonderful state of samadhi and quite spacious. But if you're aware of your body, of just normal reality, that's not what this is talking about. There's literally just these experiences. And so if you haven't had the experience, there's no sense in me. There's not much more I can say about them. I could try to put more adjectives on it. But what would the experience be of just boundless space or boundless consciousness, right? If you haven't had the experience. And it's not like you're sitting there thinking, wow, this is really great. I'm in boundless space. It's not like that. It's just boundless space or boundless consciousness. Okay. And then again, it's getting subtle when we talk about nothingness and neither perception nor non-perception, some subtle states, yeah? Okay. So I don't want to say anything more about, well, one more thing. These are not considered either in the suttas or in the Visuddhimagga to be necessary for enlightenment. But it's just filling out the map of consciousness of what's possible. So, and it's mentioned in the suttas a whole bunch of times. Okay, so that's one. And by the way, these aren't just only one path. You could develop all 3 or 2 of these paths. You don't have to just do one. The second path is developing what I call supernormal powers, or sometimes called higher knowledges. And the word in Pali is the abhinyas. And actually on page 13 of your notes near the bottom, those N's should have tildes over them. I don't know why I didn't put them in here. Abhinyas. And here's what's listed. There's a list of 3 given some places and a list of 6 given others. So the list of 3 is recollection of the power, the ability to recollect past lives. But it's really, so you could call them psychic powers. The knowledge of death and rebirth of beings. That's you see where, past lives and future lives of other beings. And knowledge of the destruction of the corruptions. And I'll come back to that in a moment. There's also, the list gets expanded here to include what's called the divine eye. And that was the same as knowledge of death and rebirth of beings. You can see just all these other realms where beings are born into, they die, they reappear. Ability to read minds. And there's all these psychic powers called the iddhis. And they're pretty fantastical. They're be able to make multiple copies of your body, dive through the earth, walk through walls, things like that. So, and there are people who, ever since the time of the Buddha and even up to contemporary times, there are people who claim to have this, and they say that it's accessible to any of us. It probably takes quite a huge amount of dedication. I don't know. I don't have any experience around these myself. I haven't tried to develop them. I don't know what would happen if you did. But it's ostensibly, we could all check out for ourselves to see whether this is true or not. But anyway, we don't need to believe any of this stuff. You can relate to this however you wish, but it's definitely talked about in more than one place in the suttas. It's there. So that's another path of development. It's kind of interesting, I think. And then the third is path, which is the path of insight. That's really what's of importance towards the path of liberation or enlightenment, is the insights, right? And we've talked a lot about insight. I won't go into that now, but it's basically the classic traditional way of thinking of it is direct perception more deeply than we're able to access in ordinary daily life consciousness, into the changing nature of phenomena, the selfless and the unsatisfactory or suffering nature of experiences. That's the basic idea. And that takes us back to, I want to say something just to end here about this destruction of the corruptions, which is the part of the abhinyas here. Because it's that ties these abhinyas, these higher powers or psychic powers, with the third path of insight. In the suttas, when someone attains enlightenment, just before, it's said that one of the ways they describe it is that person sees as it actually is. This is suffering. This is the end of suffering. This is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. This is the end of suffering. And this is the path leading to the end of suffering. That's really the Four Noble Truths. Then they're enlightened. They're liberated. Another way it's talked about is that they realize that these corruptions here, they're called asavas. Sometimes translated as, there's a number of translations. I don't want to get off into all of them because it's quite a range of meanings, but we'll just call them corruptions, sometimes called taints, have been destroyed or uprooted. Here's the list. There's the corruption or taint of sensual desire, that's gone. Craving for existence is gone. That doesn't mean you replace it with craving for non-existence. We're not going to discuss this. These are big topics, and ignorance. So what's that mean? It's a big topic. And sometimes a fourth corruption, which is called the corruption of views, is added. And it is said, that these corruptions, these asavas, have been destroyed utterly, and then one is liberated. So, 3 different paths possible. You don't hear most of this talked about so much here in the West. You're not going to hear people talk about these formless attainments, the sphere of boundless consciousness, or neither perception nor non-perception. Not talked about all that much here in the West. These abhinyas and idhis, these fantastic powers, not talked about so much. But this destruction of the corruptions, and this path of insight, that's really what I would say is of essence. Yeah. Okay.